We also discussed a very particular health challenge that I was facing and how I had started to apply your nutritional approach to see if that would resolve my issues. And so now that it's been a few months, I thought it'd be a great idea to discuss the positive results that I'm seeing using the energy balance bioenergetics nutritional approach, and kind of get your opinion as to why I'm alleviating or resolving what was a very, very serious health challenge that I faced. So let me kind of set the frame for where I was health wise prior to starting the energy balance approach to my nutrition and my diet. Because over the last 8 years, okay, so this is really important. Over the last 8 years, I've had two bouts of kidney cancer. And in the first instance, 8 years ago, we found a grapefruit-sized tumor on my left kidney. So I had surgery to remove this giant tumor along with the kidney. And I started on, so obviously I dove deep into the research to really make sure I can get a handle on what was happening with me. And all roads pointed to ketogenic diet, right? So I started on a high-fat ketogenic diet to heal myself and keep the cancer under control. Also important to note when I say keep the cancer under control, because there was also a small 2 centimeter tumor on my right kidney. And, they were telling me, we could do ablation, we could do this, we could do that. I didn't want to risk any interventions there, as I only have one kidney left. I didn't want to risk damaging the tissue if I didn't absolutely have to. And what was on my right kidney was really small. So I opted to just watch it and really just dive deep into the research on how to keep that in check and keep myself alive and thriving. Hence, ketogenic diet, right? Supposed to, if you do it right, if you do a few things, intermittent fasting, then supposedly you can keep cancer in check, certain cancers anyway. Even the studies are starting to show some beneficial effects there. So over the next couple of years that I was on that diet, I transitioned. To adding more protein in the form of red meat, then moved to a carnivore diet exclusively, mostly meat and eggs. That's been for many, many years my diet. Then 2 years ago, I had another surgery as the same cancer had moved from my kidney to my liver. And this time it was a smaller tumor, also about 2 centimeters. The first one they found on me was ginormous. It was like almost 14 centimeters. Anyway, they removed that small tumor from my liver along with a chunk of the liver and my gallbladder. That went out the door as well. So now the thing is, not having a gallbladder could be a problem when trying to digest high-fat foods, as you're probably aware. I went right back to the carnivore diet. Didn't miss a beat. But you know what? Eating too much steak and eggs gave me a real hard time digesting. I tried ox bile, but it turned out that I digested better actually without the ox bile. And then over time, I was back on mostly meat, but not much eggs. As I was kind of doing better without the eggs, digestion-wise. And I was at that point then I switched away from the higher fat meats like ribeyes, went mostly to lean sirloin, which I eventually switched to an even leaner cut, top round London broil, eating about 3 to 4 pounds worth a day. Okay, so that's where I was. I'm not that big of a guy, probably weighing in at around 160-ish pounds, up and down. But immediately after the liver surgery, as you can imagine, my liver enzymes went through the roof, right? Because you're damaging the liver. And the two big liver enzymes that everyone tracks when looking to confirm liver health is ALT and AST. My ALT went to 800. My AST went to 600. And put that in context, normal levels are much lower, right? So your AST should really be somewhere between 15 to 40. And ALT, depending on, what hospital, what doctor is measuring it, that can fall anywhere between 17 to 63 for ALT. Ultimately, over time, those enzymes did come way down. So after about 6 months, my AST and ALT stabilized. AST came back down to normal. ALT maybe into the 70s, so really a little high, but I mean, what an improvement. Then what happened is that in all the research I was continuing to do on cancer, I stumbled onto a study that found the type of kidney cancer I had, which is known as chromophobe renal cell carcinoma, did not upregulate glucose metabolism as its primary source of fuel. I was like, wait a second, I've been on a ketogenic diet for all these years, and the cancer I have, which is kind of rare, that it doesn't upregulate glucose metabolism. Instead, this particular cancer uses the lysosome within the cell. The lysosome is an organelle within the cell that recycles cellular parts, and it's a key mechanism of the autophagic process, right? So this cancer's nutritional supply chain actually comes from feeding on the broken, misformed, malfunctioning, or dying cells that the body looks to get rid of. They go into the lysosome chews it up, turns it into the substrates that made them up in the first place, sugars, lipids, proteins. That's how this particular cancer eats. There's a few cancer that does that, that operates that way. And interestingly, this process, right, where the lysosome recycles these broken cells, that gets massively upregulated when going on long multi-day fasts. So as soon as I read this, I'm like, wait a second, couple of things. First of all, I'm stopping all fasting because I was a big proponent of fasting. And I'm like, I might actually be feeding the damn cancer. Anyway, and then always intermittent fasting. I stopped it all. And I started to add, because all of a sudden I realized, wait a second, glucose isn't being upregulated. So I added some fruit to my diet. I added honey. I'll tell you what, Jay, I was eating probably 100 grams of fructose between the honey. I was eating apples. I was eating pears, which you set me straight on, by the way. We'll talk about that. But then out of the blue, as all this is happening, my blood work comes back, because we monitor me constantly because of the cancer. My blood work comes back, and my liver enzymes all of a sudden are through the roof again. This is about a year after the liver surgery now. And I tried to figure out what the hell is going on here. What could have caused this? And I'm kind of looking at what am I doing that's different. And the only things I could work out. So here was my working theory, is that, so I was prescribed a cream for a plantar wart, the side effects of which I failed to research. I mean, what could be the harm in taking a foot cream? Well, lo and behold, the cream turned out to be a skin cancer medication. Of all things, that's what they gave me, an immunotherapy. That I believe, beyond the stated side effects of altered liver function and elevated liver enzymes, once I looked into what this drug actually did, I believe it also probably triggered an autoimmune issue. So the stated side effects are elevated liver enzymes, but I believe it triggered an autoimmune reaction, possibly then exacerbated by high levels of stress hormones from the 7-year keto carnivore diet I was on. Maybe further aggravated by dumping a load of fructose, honey, apples, pears, over 100 grams a day into the diet. Maybe that had something. So who knows which one of those things was the culprit? All I know is my liver was stressed out. So at the height of these liver issues, which turned out to be about 3 months ago, my ferritin was super high, around 800. Normal is around 30. They say the highest should be 400, but should be much lower than that. Probably shouldn't be over 100 if possible. But my ALT rose, my liver enzyme ALT rose to almost 400. What's going on? 400. AST rose to almost 200. My doctors are freaking out. They're like, what's going on here? They want me to do a biopsy. And then a scan showed that I had mild steatosis, NAFLD. What the hell's going wrong with me? I'm wondering. So I was being pushed hard by my doctors to go in for a liver biopsy, because all the tests they were doing, they couldn't find any viral issues, all the hepatitises you can think of, and there's more than you know. None of them came back positive. All the other, they looked at megalovirus, they looked at Epstein-Barr, they looked at everything. So they're like, you got to have a biopsy. And I'm like, I got to figure out what's going on, and I'm trying to resolve it without having the biopsy. I tried TUDCA, right? Especially as my gallbladder was gone, I figured maybe that could help. I tried quercetin to chelate iron. I tried IP6 to chelate iron. But around this time, I also discovered you, right? And it's actually a rediscovery for me of bioenergetics via your podcast, because I had originally read some of Ray Peat's material years ago when I first got cancer, but I dismissed it as soon as he mentioned sugar. Jay, I was out the door. I was like, no, you can't be eating sugar. So I was like, this guy Ray Peat's a nut. Forget it. But I found you, started listening to your podcast, and the way you approached the bioenergetic approach, the misconceptions of a high carbohydrate diet, why maybe it's really a low carb diet or a carnivore diet, which is causing the type of stress that might be, and that fructose might not really be as much of a problem and as much of a demon as everyone makes it out to be. Your information was nuanced enough to be highly intriguing, given how the entire alternative health sphere is really just slamming carbs, including myself, right? Especially simple carbs, right? Sugar is the worst poison and toxin you could put in your body, supposedly. But you pointed out some really interesting facts about metabolism and sugar. So I started deep diving into all of your episodes on fructose, on low carb diets, on NAFLD. And I ultimately downloaded your food guide and made significant dietary changes based on your protocols, based on your content. And I've seen, Jay, remarkable improvements in my liver function and several other areas as well, which I'll mention later on. So I definitely want to delve into those details. I want to show our audience. I'll share my screen. I want to show the audience those improvements. So it's not just me talking about it. I want them to see the blood work. And we'll take our viewers through that. That's all right. Let me share my screen. I've got my blood work up here. All right. Jay, can you see this?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so here we're showing, this is ALT, right? And here's my name up here in the upper right corner, should anyone doubt that this is my blood work. But here we see ALT. It tells you the normal range should be between 17 and 63. So here, December 9th of 2023, you could see, and we can go back further than this to actually see when it first erupted. So let's look at all data. Here you go. All right, this is you can see here August 12th, 2022 as the start point all the way to now. So we've got almost 2 years worth of data here on my ALT, liver enzyme. This is, so August 27th of 2022, 829. Wow, ring the bell. That's the surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So of course we're going to see that, but you could see over time how that dropped and pretty much resolved, right? My liver healed from the surgery. And then we can go here. July of 2022, just about a year ago, is when I was on that foot cream. I had added a lot of fructose to my diet at the same time. I wish I didn't, because then I would know for sure what was what. But I was doing both of these things in conjunction, and we do my blood work, and lo and behold, look at that. It's 77 here in March. Now we're in July and it's 100. What the hell happened? And what we can see is that it starts to rise, comes back, starts to come back down, starts to go back up. I'm trying all different things here. I'm like, what am I doing? Right? I don't, I'm trying different foods. I don't know what's going on. And you can see here, November of 2023, it's at 210. So it's getting even higher. So 154. Now it's up here at 229 in December. What the hell's going on? It comes all the way back down from December 9th to January 6th. We have a massive drop. That's good news. I thought I figured it out. What did I do? I started taking Tudka. And I started coming off of, Jay, all the apples and pears because I wasn't sure what was going on. So I greatly lowered the amount of fruit. Maybe I went from 8 apples and pears a day or 6. I don't know how. I was eating a lot. And no honey for sure. But I was seeing an improvement. I think I've got this licked. The Tudka is helping. I'm taking the quercetin. I'm taking the IP6. Okay, I've got this licked. Boom. From January 6th to February 3rd, 235, it's back up. What the hell is going on? And in March of 2023, I'm at 392, so almost 400. And now I decide, I'm still eating, at this point, I'm eating about 3 to 4 pounds of meat a day. I'm eating a few pieces of fruit, no honey. So this is where I really dive into your approach. This is where I start increasing the carbohydrates, lowering the meat consumption, adding fruits that I think from your dietary guide, oranges, pineapple, I started adding, right, so these non-fermentable fruits that have, you also talk about, but fructose to glucose ratio being important to consider. So I started eating more of that. And also I started adding some white rice to my diet. So I know on your dietary guide, white rice, easily digestible. If you don't have any issues with it, then it could be a good addition as far as starches go. Maybe not as good as potatoes. I know I started adding some potatoes as well, sweet potato. So sweet potato, white rice, oranges, pineapple, and the meat consumption came down to about maybe about 2 pounds from 3 to 4 pounds. And we see this drop from 392 to 302 from March to April, just 2 weeks later. We see a nice drop. So I'm like, I'm not getting too excited because I've seen this before. But now I decide I'm going all in, and I add a lot more. So I add a bit more oranges. I add a bit more white rice, a bit more potato, lower the meat again. Now I'm down to about 0.75 pound of meat a day when I was up at 3 or 4 pounds, mostly now carbohydrate based. We come down from April 6th to April 20th, again, just a couple weeks later. We're at 111 on the ALT. And then I'm like, I'm all in here. I start adding some juice. Never drinking juice. Juice is the worst thing, Jay. You can't have fruit juice. Everyone tells you it's as bad as soda. But I added orange juice and some pineapple juice. And again, just complete reversal. Super hot. Probably eating about 600 grams of carbohydrates a day. Maybe about 120 grams worth of protein. The fat is down at about maybe 10% of the diet, right? According to the app I'm using, I'm probably getting about, I don't know, maybe 60 to 80, maybe 60-ish grams of fat a day. Not a lot, right? And May 4th. So from April 20th to May 4th, a couple of weeks later, 58 on the ALT. Then 43 on the ALT. It's normal for the first time. And then June 8th was the last. So a couple of weeks ago, Jay, was the last blood test I did. And we're still in the normal range here. Look at this. I haven't seen this in how long? I'm talking about, haven't seen this in years. I haven't seen normal. Here's right before my surgery, Jay, 2 years ago. My liver enzymes were 68, right? So just above the normal range. And then I go into the surgery. So it's still in this right yellow zone. It's not in the green zone. It isn't until I went onto your approach that for the first time in the last couple of years that I've had normal ALT. What's going on, Jay? Explain this to me. Because and by the way, I do a scan, and the scan that correlates with this time frame, because I'm monitored. They weren't scanning me for fatty liver. I get scanned for the cancer, right? Every 4 to 6 months, I get a follow up. So the one that I had done in November showed mild steatosis, but the one that I did again in around March time, around March showed nothing. No liver. And then they made me do a ferrous scan, which measures the amount of iron in your liver, and that showed no steatosis whatsoever. So the steatosis is gone. The ALT normal. And then just also let's check AST.
Sure. And just to clarify for listeners, steatosis is fatty liver. That just means fat in the liver.
Exactly. So here you go. Super high when I did the surgery, 457 on the AST. It shouldn't be, but 15 to 41 is normal. Surgery knocks it up to 457. I recover, right? It's normal here in March of 2023. Then it starts its climb, just like the ALT starts going up, gets to a point in March, 182. But then with your approach, we start to get into the normal range. But why would the stress on the liver start to resolve as I'm taking your approach?
Yeah. So I think there are a few primary changes we can talk about. One is we dramatically lowered the protein and fat. The protein is still in a good range. We're still getting enough,
Okay.
but lowered it quite a bit from the 3 or 4 pounds of meat you were having a day.
Right.
I think closer to 4. We dramatically increased the carbs. And then, I mean, and we made sure it was easy to digest carbs as well, right? Not having the apples and pears, which we know can be quite a bit harder to digest. There are fermentable carbs in there, and there's a much higher amount of glucose or of fructose to glucose, which is only an issue because we can't absorb it as well. So that can make it harder to digest as well.
Okay.
So we shift toward easily digestible carbs, we increase them quite a bit, and we lower the protein and fat. And not excessively with the protein, of course, we need enough.
Yes.
And so the result, I think the biggest, clearest one, I mean, there's a couple. One is we're going to have dramatically improved mitochondrial function where we're producing ATP much more effectively, much more efficiently, with much less oxidative stress, much less reactive oxygen species. And it's shown that in fatty liver and liver inflammation, the excess lipid oxidation is a primary driver there because of the increased oxidative stress as a result of relying on lipid oxidation. So that's one factor. And then the other is, as a result of that, we've dramatically lowered our systemic stress. So I'm sure if we were measuring things, the stress hormones, which sometimes are tough to measure because they fluctuate so much, but knowing what's going on systemically, we had way lower stress hormones here, meaning lower lipolysis, which is great because that lipolysis contributes to some of these issues.
Mhm.
But the stress hormones alone put a huge burden on the liver and create that inflammatory process in the liver. They force it to produce a lot of glucose via gluconeogenesis,
Right.
has a cost of ammonia production as well. And some people are of the belief that, it's a internal process that's normal. So how could it be bad? But cortisol is a normal hormone that we produce as needed as well. But that doesn't mean we want to do things to encourage it. High levels of cortisol we know are a problem. And relying excessively on gluconeogenesis is a result of stress and compounds and adds to that stress. It's something that is extremely inefficient compared to just using glucose itself. And so we generally don't want to rely on that process. And so that would have been dramatically downregulated. We would have improved our glycogen storage at the liver. And by reducing the impacts of the stress hormones at the liver,
Mhm.
which amplify the stress and inflammation, we're seeing major relief there as well. So those would be the main things I'd be pointing at. We maintained low endotoxin. We dramatically lowered our systemic stress state. We dramatically increased our energy availability, our conversion of fuel to energy, and the amount of high quality fuel we had available. And those things are massively important for reducing inflammation, oxidative stress, and reducing the liver fat that even though that happened later on as a result of the inflammation, we saw
Right.
both of those things go away. And that's, I know that wasn't the central thing, but most people would be very surprised at, adding juice and tons of fruit, tons of carbohydrates, lots of starches as well, and to see reversal of the liver enzymes and the fatty liver, again, without any change, I'm assuming, in terms of, massive body weight loss or
I mean,
something.
I
This
even
wasn't compounded by losing weight.
no, I didn't. No, actually, if anything, I've gained probably about. I've had to cut down on the rice. I was getting nuts. But I'm probably now. I was 153. I'm only 5'6", so I was about 153 pounds when I really went all in on this approach. Now maybe 161.
Uh-huh.
So a bit of a weight gain, but you can still see my abs. So I'm still in great shape, still working out. That hasn't changed. Okay, another marker I want to show you. I want to show you something which changed, which I've never seen normal in all the time. Again, almost 7 years before I changed, start eating some fruit. Always my urea nitrogen
Mm.
when I from the beginning of going on the ketogenic diet. I'm going to just all data here. It has almost never been normal, right? So my urea nitrogen, right, should be between 8 and 20. So here, when I had the surgery, it was normal. You know why? Because I wasn't eating. I had no food coming in. And in this state here, it seemed to resolve. But back on the diet, full bore here, right? October 29, 2022. It's 41. So urea nitrogen, normal is 8 to 20. Here I'm 41, and it is always high. It is always, never has it been normal. And then only when, You look at the drop here again, March 23rd. That's the same time we started to see, that this was the height, and then the drop off when I take the energy balance Jay Feldman approach. Things start to resolve, get much, and boom, for the first time in almost 8 years, it's normal. Why would that be?
Yeah, so when we're looking at urea and nitrogen, most people know this as BUN,
Yes,
a BUN test. We're looking at a marker of kidney function, and the reason why it's a marker of kidney function is because if you're seeing elevated levels of urea and nitrogen, it's basically a waste product from the kidneys that the kidneys aren't doing as good of a job of clearing. Now, one of the things that is known to stress the kidneys is excess ammonia, excess protein, which normally it requires quite a bit of protein to do that. But we were talking about really quite a lot of protein, quite a lot of gluconeogenesis, quite a lot of systemic stress,
right.
all of which are putting a big burden on a single kidney, right? We only have one instead of two.
That's
And
right.
so probably some reduced function there. And then also probably some extra endotoxin too from the apples and pears at that time. And endotoxin and kidney dysfunction are very tightly correlated as well. And as we're talking about the systemic stress state, you add cortisol and take out energy to a system and to an organism, and a lot of things start to go downhill. And liver function, kidney function are, very common ones. And that's, I think, the biggest highlight here that we've seen is when we're talking energy balance, we've talked about dramatically improving our energy production and availability, dramatically lowering stress hormones, and as a result, dramatically lowering inflammation and improving liver function and kidney function.
Yeah, just amazing. I, you know, I honestly, I feel amazing. I feel great. And by the way, I also stopped taking all of my supplements.
Mm.
So I told you before, quercetin, not taking quercetin. I'm really only taking 1 round of IP6 a day, but that's for the cancer because IP6 has been shown in a lot of studies to be great for a lot of different cancers to kind of keep things at bay. But stop taking the quercetin. I stopped taking. I stopped taking magnesium. I stopped taking TUDCA. I stopped taking boron. I stopped taking. So I was taking a lot of supplements. Um, just with the diet, we're seeing this kind of improvement, and it's not. I mean, it's dramatic, right? Like this is dramatic improvement.
Yeah,
Um,
just in weeks time.
yeah, weeks. That's right. You're right. Weeks, which is just insane. And listen, I have to. Yeah. All right. I'll say something in a moment. Okay. One last point because you talked about cortisol and immunity. This is my white blood cell count. Okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
This is going back to October of 2023, experiencing all these issues. Normal white blood cell range 4.0 on the low, 11.0 on the high. Obviously, you want to not see super high white blood cell counts either, right? Because that's indicative of an infection. So we see here that my white blood cell count is very low. And then, as we start to get to this inflection point where I'm seeing my highest liver enzymes, it's actually it's getting to its lowest, right? Here, April 6th, 2.7. This is when I'm just starting to make that big change, the big switch. And then we see it start to come up a little bit, 2.9. By May, for the first time in a very long time, my white blood cell count is in the normal range. And so you talk about cortisol and immunity. I'm wondering if that was at issue here as well.
Certainly looks like it. Yeah. Yeah. Elevated stress and lack of energy suppressing immune function for sure.
So Jay, I'm going to tell you right now, I want to thank you for the content you put out there because, the fact that I found you, and by the way, I'm going to say this, God led me to you. Christ led me to you because there is no way, anyone who knows me knows there would be no way I would ever be advocating for a high carbohydrate diet. It's the fact that not only did I find you, but that I actually listened to what you were saying and actually applied it, given I've already been down the repeat road before when I was in dire straits and I rejected it. So there was something about finding you, listening to your content, listening to the way you approached it, that it had to be a God thing. It's a God thing. I'm telling you right now, Christ led me to you. And thanks to your content, thanks to your approach, thanks to your ideas, and it's also the way you communicate them and the very well thought out approach that you take. You're not bombastic, you're not a sensationalist. Your content is really, really well put together, really well thought out, to the degree that you could convince a carnivore, 7-year keto carnivore, to do this. And it's not like, oh, I'm desperate, I'll try anything. Right? The last thing I would have ever done was add sugar, of all things, to my diet. Thank you, God. Thank you, Christ. And thank you, Jay Feldman. Thank you for the content you put out. Thank you for the work that you're doing. It certainly made a difference in my life. I mean, like, life-altering difference. So yeah, I wanted to give you, some praise here, and also thank you.
Well, yeah, you're very welcome, and I appreciate the praise. That's every time. It's always so amazing to see these sorts of improvements, and I'm glad that you were still open enough to at that point, despite being deep in carnivore. No,
I definitely wasn't open. Trust me, I wasn't open. But like I said, a higher power led me to you. You cracked the armor, and again, it's not like I haven't heard this before, but the way you approach it, it makes sense, to the point where you really have to rethink your entire framework, and that's not an easy thing for anyone to do. And I'm sure you see a lot of people who have been on long-term carnivore and ketogenic diets coming to you with all sorts of issues that they don't understand. They don't understand what's happening. Is that the case?
oh, of course, yeah, of course. And normally it's not liver enzymes quite like this. Normally it's insomnia and so
Okay.
seeing lower testosterone and libido, and maybe some skin issues cropping up, some digestive issues. It's sometimes it is the autoimmunity and intense things and weight regain that, even though they were super strict carnivore and keto, they started regaining lots of weight. So a lot of times it is a number of things, but normally not quite the liver enzymes we were seeing.
Well, yeah, just fantastic stuff. Keep doing what you're doing, Jay. It's amazing.